Welcome to another show. I'm Sid, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to create this 2D animation effect in Spark AR Studio, which is the program used to create filters for Instagram and Facebook. I'm also going to be using GIMP, which is basically like Photoshop but free and open source. It has simplified features though, so I will be using a plugin. It's called Export Layers, and it allows you to, as the name suggests, export multiple layers. I'll explain more in a minute, but there will be a link in the description to that, along with everything else I mentioned, all the resources and all that good stuff. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the video, if you've enjoyed it. And yeah, first thing we're going to do is set up the scene. So I'll pause this and I will create a new project, and we'll get everything set up the way we want it, and then we'll jump over to GIMP and I'll show you exactly what we're going to do in there as well. Okay, so here we are over in our new project, and the first thing I'm going to do is switch to the FaceTime camera. So hello, here I am back again. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a rectangle to our scene. Two in fact. So we'll come down here to rectangle, and that will appear nested inside of this canvas. Next I'm going to duplicate that. You can right click to duplicate or just hit the shortcut key. And now we're going to rename this one background and this one foreground. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to add material layers for each of these. So we'll add a background layer here, and we'll rename that one background, and we'll add a foreground material called foreground. Ba-bam. And now we can start adjusting the size. So I'm going to fill the width here, and I'm going to fill the height so that this one background here fills the entire screen. And I'm going to come down here, I'm going to change the color of it so that it's more distinct against this other one. So I'll change that to something nice and muted that's easy to look at. And then as you can see, the foreground is just sitting directly in the center on top of the screen. Now you can move it any way you like. You can like drag it around. You can even go into 2D mode if you want more precision. You can stretch it out and just be completely manual with it if you like. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to set it to be exactly 50% of this larger one. So if you take these values here and you just half them, so we end up with 187.5 for the width and 333.5 for the height, and that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come up down here, I'm going to change the shader type to flat for both of them, so highlight both and set it to flat. That way it will not interact with any lights that are in the scene. It will just be a completely neutral, unlit, perfectly balanced blue or whatever color you choose. And now I'm going to come up here to camera, and I'm going to hit segmentation and texture extraction. You know about this if you've seen any of my other videos. It's a pretty common technique. And then I'm going to come down here to foreground, and I'm going to set the texture here to camera texture. So now we have a blue background with the camera projected at 50% scale in front of it. So as you can see now, I have all this space around me for animation. I've practiced doing this a couple of times with 30% scale and 70%, and I found that in both cases they're either too small or too large for my personal preferences, because I like having a little bit of space around the edge while I'm drawing. It gives me a little bit more leeway, because I'm not that great at drawing or animation or anything, and I'm learning as I go. So yeah, this is around 50%. But you can adjust it and, like I said, move it wherever you like. You can also check the alpha box here under foreground and add the person segmentation mask if you want to mask yourself out from the background as well. But it's important to remember that these are two separate layers, so if you want to animate something that goes between them, then you will have to make two separate files and import them. And if the idea is to connect between the two, then you're going to have to manually do that before you import those files. Just be aware of that. We're not going to be doing that today. I'm going to uncheck that because I like this clean look. And also one more thing, if you wanted to add another rectangle with just an image on it to create some kind of static border, then of course you could do that as well. I'm just trying to show you the simplest version of this tutorial that I can, so you guys can go out and enumerate your ideas upon the world. But yeah, so we've set everything up now. We have our frame and the image projected on top of it. So everything is pretty much set up, ready to go. We're going to jump over to GIMP now, and I'm going to show you the project file and how to create it and set it up, and talk you through just the basics of keyframe animation for those of you who may not be familiar with it. So let's go over to GIMP. One quick thing I should mention before we get started is the plugin that I'm using. So GIMP has a number of open source plugins that you can download and install. They add features similar to Photoshop's premium features, but free, which is great. So there's a link in the description of the video. It'll take you to this page. and you hit this button, code, and download the zip file to download all of this, the package of this file here, export layers, which is the plugin we're going to be using. That in GIMP, typically you can only export one layer at a time, whereas in Photoshop you can export multiple layers individually as like a big folder of images and in sequence, which is what you need for animation. So this plugin is really useful for that. You can of course do it manually if you're not able to download this, and it does vary the installation by operating system. So if you want a tutorial specifically for your system, I would recommend Googling it. I'm not going to be giving a tutorial for that. I have a Mac personally, so that's the only system that I know, and I installed it on my Mac, but it is available on Windows and Linux as well. So yeah, link in the description for that. That's the plugin I'll be using. Okay, so here we are now over in GIMP. I have my animation template already set up. I'm going to walk you through it, show you how it works, what the basics of keyframe animation actually are, and then I'll duplicate it and just show you exactly how I've set everything up, centered it, how I've organized the layers and everything. So let's get started with that. First of all, as you can see, I have my background layer. This is exactly the same as the background layer that we have over here, and the black square in the center is this layer right at the top, the camera. So this is the most visible layer, so it's always going to be on top, and then the background layer is always going to be on the bottom. And then we have in between, we have 24 frames which I've made, which are right now completely empty. There's nothing in there. They're all visible. But yeah, 24 frames, because typically in animation you will either have 12 or 24 frames, sometimes 8. It depends how static you want the image to be. Typically the human eye will perceive images at around 8 to 12 frames. So that's a good reference point to start from. I like older animations from the 30s, 40s and 50s to the animations. They were typically 8 to 12 frames, but as we've progressed, cartoons that you see on TV, they're usually at 24 frames. So depending on how much movement you want, how much clean movement you want in your animations, will depend on the number of frames that you have. So right now we have 24 frames here, which is 1 second of footage at 24 frames, when played back at 24 frames per second. If we played it back at 12 frames per second, then these 24 frames would now take 2 seconds to play back. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I'll try and explain it again when we get back into Spark. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to create this project. So we're going to create a new image. And as you can see, I've already got these settings preloaded in from the Spark. So we have from the Spark project. So we have 375 and 667 as our width and height. I'll minimize that again. So we can create a new project with those settings, and that will just make the perfect image for us. So now we have our new image, and as you can see, it's all set up just the way that we wanted. And now we can add another layer on top of that. And this is where we name our new layer camera. And under the width and height, we're just going to set it to be the same scale as the camera in our scene. So we have here 187.5 and 333.5. Now within Spark, you can do this. You can have these half pixel sizes, but inside of GIMP, that isn't actually possible. So as you can see, when I try and put in 187.5 and hit the next one to change the height, it will now round it up to the nearest number. So bear that in mind. You will have this very small difference between the image size in GIMP and the image size in Spark. So be aware of that when you're drawing animations that directly connect with this line. But yeah, that is an inevitable thing that's going to happen, unfortunately. So now we have 667, 333.5, and that will turn into 334. And now we hit OK. And as you can see, now we have this layer up here. Now to distinguish it from the white layer down here, I'm going to hit this paint bucket tool. And by default it should be black anyway, but if it's not, you can just hit this button and it will switch between white and black, and then we will paint that so that it's distinguished and stands out from the other background that we have. So now we've got this camera up here. I'm going to hit this tool up here, the alignment tool. You can just hit Q and that will align, that will bring you into this menu. And now I'm going to hit the camera, I'm going to select it in my scene. And these little buttons down here, they will give you the option of moving things. So now I can center it by hitting this one, and I can center it again on the vertical with that button. So now without having done too much, I've set up the background and the camera here, and now those two layers are right there where I need them. So now I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call this one frame 1, and that's going to be full size. So go back to the full size of 375, 667, depending on how you're optimizing this as well. So if you're optimizing for an iPad, then I would recommend starting with that template and using that scale in Spark, and then taking those numbers and moving them across. This is, I think, default for an iPhone 8. When I open Spark, it's default sized for an iPhone 8. It will scale the images up or down automatically depending on the user's device. But if you want your animations to be like, if you're doing something like a stickman and you're doing it on the very smallest screen, then when it scales up, it will be stretched out a lot. So if you're doing 2D animation, I would recommend using a larger screen and allowing it to scale down rather than scaling it up, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I'm using the iPhone 8 just as the example. You can play around with this yourself. So we'll set it at 375, 667, and we'll hit OK, new layer, and that creates a new layer right there. So we have frame 1 now. And with frame 1 set up, all we have to do now is create the others. So we'll just keep hitting add a new layer. We'll rename this one frame 2, and then add that. And we'll do that for as many frames as you want. I'm probably going to speed this up now, so see you on the other side. It did feel like it needed something though. This section was a bit quiet, so I'm kind of just recording in post, a little bit of sound, here we go, and done. Okay, and there we go. That's all of our frames. I'm just going to check that I got the numbers right. That looks pretty good to me. So there you go, we have now our background and our camera as they were set up in Spark AR, and we have 24 frames here, which currently are PNGs, which means they have alpha channels, so they are transparent, as you can see here from the preview, which means that if I take my pen tool and I draw on this layer, then it appears over this one, and if I do the same on this layer, then it will go over the top of that. So if I now drag frame 1 above, then that will be above this layer. So I'll reverse that. I can also do something here cool, which is reduce the opacity. So if I drop the opacity on this one down to 50, it has a kind of onion skin effect, which you get in some animation programs. So you can reduce the opacity of the previous frame as you're drawing the next one, which definitely helps with keyframe animation. So there's a few little tips there to consider. Now we have our 24 frames, that is 1 second of animation. So I'm gonna start drawing something, I guess. One more quick thing I should probably mention is that for this next part, I'm going to be using a graphics tablet. So I have this here with, where is it? A little pen, and you just sort of plug that in and draw. I'm sure you know what that is. You can do this with just the mouse or the trackpad or whatever. But I had this, it was very cheap, and I will leave a link in the description to the brand on Amazon. The one I have is one of the very, the least expensive ones that you can get. So obviously it's not necessary, but it does help if you're going to be doing a lot of drawings. If your animations are going to be 5, 10, 15 seconds, then you're looking at like several hundred frames of animation. So something like this definitely will come in handy if you're going to be drawing and animating quite a lot. Okay, so we have our project set up now, and I'd recommend saving it at this point so that you don't have to repeat the process of adding new frames and whatever. You basically have 1 second of animation here, played back at 24 frames. I recommend saving that template and then just duplicating it whenever you want to start a new project. So now we have our first frame. We're going to do an image. Now I can't draw, I have this graphics tablet, but I'm not very good at drawing. So I'm going to take this cloud image, which I downloaded from the internet. I just typed in 2D drawing cloud, like simple. Find something that you can drag in. It doesn't matter if it's a PNG or a JPEG. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hit this button up here. So you drag it in and it becomes a new layer on its own. You can see right now it's between frame 1 and 2. I'm going to drag that down so it's just above the background frame beneath all these others. And then I'm going to click on it and I'm going to hit this button, scale, or Shift S to scale. And then all you do is drag it down. And then you can move it with this button. So you hit M to move, and then you scale, and you just kind of put it and get it in a nice place where you're happy with the size. Because this is, you could obviously draw if you're better at drawing, but just to give you an example, I'm going to show you. So I have the cloud here imported in, I've scaled it down, looks pretty good at that size to me. So now I'm going to come up here to frame 1, and I'm going to just move the cloud where I want it. So actually, let's do frame 12 instead. So we're going to be halfway through that's a keyframe. So we'll find the midpoint and we'll place the cloud exactly where it's going to be in the middle of our animation. So if it comes in from the left, say it comes in from the left and it exits on the right, so it's going to be the very middle. And we're on frame 12 now, but this is visible as well underneath our cloud. So now all you want to do is click on your paint tool or your pencil or whatever texture you want to use. Reduce the pixel size a little bit. I like to use between 5 and 10, and then just kind of trace it out. And it doesn't have to be super accurate, but you just want to generally get a sense of what the cloud is. And there you go. That's pretty much it. So it's a very simple drawing. Now if I come down here to the cloud layer and I hide it, you'll see all that's left is my terrible drawing of a cloud. Now I can bring it back in, and I can even make that one invisible. So now that's gone. So what you want to do basically is move this cloud, set yourself some keyframes. So if we do keyframe 1 as, if we set it frame 1 as just being completely empty, and then on frame 2 we can have it come in and just be starting to appear off the left of the screen. So we'll come up here, frame 1 we're just going to leave blank, frame 2, and then we come in and we draw it in here. So just make sure that you're on your pen tool, that's P, the shortcut, and then you just kind of draw around it. And because, like I said earlier, you can reduce the opacity, so we can drop that down to 50. We could drop this one down to 50, and we could do the same thing for the last frame where it's going to be off the other edge of the screen. And we just pen tool, make sure that we're on the right layer. So we'll come all the way up here to, why is there only 23 frames? Okay, well I'm going to add another one, frame 24 there. We're going to do that on the very last frame. So now P tool, and we come up here and we just draw the outline of the cloud. And like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. And if you wanted to, you could draw maybe 2 or 3 clouds and then just duplicate those layers and move them around. But if you draw each frame individually, then it will look more realistic, I guess, smoother, I don't know. I guess it depends on the style that you're going for. But now we have this, we'll reduce the opacity on that one as well. So we'll get that down to 50. And now you have your 3 keyframes. So you have the start one here, you have the middle one here, and you have the end one here. And now basically all you have to do is take your cloud and drag it and make it and fill in these gaps. So you come down here now and you would go to frame 3 and you would go to your pen tool and you would draw that in, and then you would move it again to frame 4, frame 5, 6, 7, etc. And you just keep doing that all the way along until you've filled in this entire section. And you can hide the cloud or you can reduce the opacity just to make it easier for yourself. So yeah, that's the basics of keyframe animation in GIMP. I've used the cloud as the example because it's very simple. It goes from left to right. It doesn't do too much, and it's the same shape pretty much throughout. It can have these small variations that gives it more of a natural look, but it isn't as complicated as something like a flower, which you would have a keyframe of. If I drag this in, for example, I have here. So if I drag this down, you can have something like a flower too, but you would have this be the final frame where it was fully grown, and then you would have a keyframe like 0, like keyframe 1 here, which was just empty, and then you would have to slowly grow the flower out and draw each part of it sprouting and blooming, and it's slightly more complex, which is why I've gone for a more simple shape. But obviously, the more you practice, the better you'll get, the more naturally this will come, is what I'm assuming. I don't do it myself very often, but I am trying to get into this kind of thing more, so yeah. But I'm going to delete this flower for now, and I'm going to speed up the process of filling in the rest of these gaps. So I'll be back with you in just a second. See you on the other side. Me again, recording with no mic, just in post. This video took so long to make. Like, I've been recording for 2 days because my computer's so slow right now for some reason. Maybe it's the heat, I don't know. If you enjoy this, if you found the video useful, please leave a like, don't forget to subscribe, it means a lot. And yeah, that's about it. I'm just really trying to kill the time now. I think we're near the end of this clip, so back to the video, I guess. Okay, so now we have all of our frames drawn. As you can see, they're at 50% opacity right now, but they are all there, and I've made every single layer visible. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to make the whole lot invisible really quick. And then what I'm going to do is going to go through each one individually, check it for imperfections, make sure that they're all looking okay as individual frames, and increase the opacity back to 100%. So I'm going to do that off screen and cut back. See you in a sec. Okay, so I've gone through, I've checked each frame individually. They all look pretty good to me. If you have any issues, you can always delete them and add them back in. Just draw them and position them again. It's relatively simple. And now I've increased the opacity on all of them to 100%, so we can see them all as they actually look. Okay, so now we have all of our frames visible in the scene. We're ready to export. If we were doing this manually without the plugin Export Layers, which is linked in the description, then the process would be to make all of these frames invisible, leave the background layer visible, and then make each frame visible one by one and export that layer. If you try and export this file as one big visible layer, then what it will do is merge all of this together, and this will be the final output, which is not really what you want. So yeah, that's why I'm using the plugin. So if you hit File up here and you have it installed, you'll have this Export Layers option. So you can hit that instead. What it'll do is open up this menu here. You select where you want your file to go. I have already created this clouds folder on the desktop, and it gives you this preview of all the files that are going to be exported. So the background here, the cloud file, the original image that we imported, all of our frames, and then this camera that we made as well. So now if you hit export, you'll be given this little menu, export image as PNG. You just want to leave everything as it is, including the background color, because it doesn't matter too much. Spark will import that as a PNG anyway. So now you hit export, and it will do that. It will merge all these visible layers, it will export it, and if we open this folder up, you can see them actually rendering into the folder much faster than if I was to do it myself. Okay, so now that we have this, we're ready to go back into Spark. So save this, make sure that you've got it, make sure that it's a duplicate of your original template, because it saves time when you're trying to make your next one. And yeah, let's get back into Spark. I'll show you how to implement this now into your filters. Welcome back to Spark AR. I'm wearing the same shirt, but it is a different day. This video is taking a long time to film. My computer's struggling a lot right now. Please excuse any lag. I'm trying to edit it out as we go. So we have our scene as we've set up already, the background and the foreground, with our material layers here, and we've separated out, we've scaled down and texture extracted to put our camera right in the middle. So now what we want to do is, under our background, we're going to come down here and we're going to add, under texture, we're going to add a new animation sequence. That will appear down here in this new folder in our assets panel. And then in the textures section of this animation sequence, we're going to choose a file. And on the desktop, where we've already created our file here, we're going to highlight everything apart from our camera, apart from our background, and apart from the original images that you want. So just the frames, only the frames that you've created. And we're going to open that in here. It's going to take a minute to load. And once it does, you will have a animation sequence. Okay, so here we go. As you can see, it's loaded in now, and it's doing this. So we have our original video, and projected over the blue screen that we created is now our original video with this transparent animation over the top. It looks pretty cool. It's running at 25 frames per second right now. So if we drop that down to 24, it's now running every one of those frames within a 1 second period. You can see what that looks like. You can drop it down here to 12 frames per second, and that will run it back now over the course of 2 seconds. So we have 24 frames playing back a little bit slower. You can drop it down now to 8 frames per second, and we get a 3-second animation, and so on. You can play around with it and experiment. You can have things slightly out of time if you want. If you have different things, different layers, then it might be worth having some of them out of time, like a flower growing might move at a different frame rate than clouds moving across the sky, things like that. And to make the background blue again, we need to come under our background, and we can make that white because we don't actually need that one to be blue anymore. What we're going to do is make a new rectangle and drag that up to where our background is. And we're going to rename our actual background that we've already created. We're going to rename that animation now that it has one there, and the same with the material layer down here. And then with this one, we're just going to rename that so it's our new background. Add a material for that. Same thing, name it background. Okay, so now we're going to come up here and we're going to fill the width and we're going to fill the height. So now it completely takes up our background, and the cloud is still visible with our video and everything. Now we're going to come under the background. We're going to change the shader type to flat. I already did that. I'm editing badly. and just change the color to whatever you like. I have this nice muted blue here, but there it is. That's pretty much the entire effect. It has this simple cloud right now, but you could obviously do anything you like. The more time you take, the more artistic skill you have, the greater your filter will be. Okay, so my phone decided to completely give up, but I've exported the effect to my phone and I'm doing the outro from here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found this effect interesting and the tutorial useful. If you did, don't forget to leave a comment. If you made it this far into the video, let me know, because I appreciate it. And it's hard to see in the statistics exactly who makes it where and when. I've left some polls in the past, but yeah. That's about it. If you enjoyed it, like the video, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, and hopefully I'll be making a lot more tutorials soon. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Peace.